Hello everyone, welcome to History Lessons. My name is Divya and today we are doing this very unique topic, Jaina attitude towards food. Food is an essential part of people's lives and not just means of survival. It is a main factor in how we view and differentiate people and influence the impact on their culture. Consuming food is not just a matter of taste, although we cannot separate taste from food, but it is more like a habit which is intensely mediated by familiar social and religious consideration. Now, food plays an important role in many religious ceremonies. The religious commitment to food is influenced by many things ranging from the personal spirituality and experience to social pattern of belonging, as well as their ethical, political, and doctrinal convictions related to food and eating. In this context, we will be analyzing the social reality by taking the case study of Jain attitude towards food in ancient India, as food seems to be so central to the Jaina tradition. Now, in this regard, there is this very important writer whose name is Padmanabh as Jaini. In his characteristically illuminating essay on fear of food, the Jain attitude on eating draws a distinction between the Vedic Brahmanical tradition and the Jaina shamanic tradition on the basis of their attitude towards eating. Now, in Vedic Brahmanical tradition, the Vedic ritual involves some kind of offering of food as an oblation to God. Now, this food is consumed as prasad. Vedic priest or Shirs take this prasad and declare to consume or imbibe soma and gain immortality. In Taittiriya Upanishad, the Taittiriya Upanishad also state that food is Brahma, that is Anam Brahma, and recites a prayer which is like this: let us eat all together. Now, food were also offered to Pitris in Shraddh. So, in contrast, the Jaina shaman tradition shows a total detachment towards food. However, as Jaini pinpointed that they are, maybe detached from food, but they are not indifferent toward food. In fact, food become very central aspect of Jain philosophy, right from its consumption and regulation around its consumption to the eschewing of food, that is the practice of fasting. So, in contrast to the Vedic Brahmanical tradition, they are completely indifferent towards food. They reject the notion of sacredness of food, and they also prohibit the consumption of prasad. So, they do not attach any, spirituality to the food, right? So, they also decree the practice of offering food to God, which was there in Vedic tradition, as completely futile. Now, this sense they were different from the Vedic Brahmanism, and central to the spiritual practice of the shamans is the tapas. Now, what is tapas? Tapas is basically drying out of body by reducing the intake of food. That is central to the practice of tapas, so significant to the spiritual practice of the shamanic tradition. In fact, a personality who is short of contemporary but a senior contemporary of both Buddha and Mahavira is Makhali Ghosal. We all know that he was the founder of Ajivika sect, and it remained important for quite some time. Okay, now Ghosal said to died fasting without water with only a mango gutli placed inside his mouth for the purpose of salivating. Okay, now there is this source called Acharanga Sutra, and it is very important to tell us about Jains. So the Acharanga Sutra of Jains tell us about the severe tapas during the 12 years of Mahavira's wandering life, prior to his attainment of tapas. Now the Acharanga Sutra of Jaina narrate that severe tapas he followed, right? So it also, like during the 12 years, Mahavira survived or subsisted on only 3 kind of food, that is rice, pulses, and pounded jujube, which is known as beer. And even this meager food he did not consume on daily basis, but he took it every 6th, 8th, 10th, and 12th days. And later, Jain commentator on Acharanga Sutra says that in these 12 years of wandering life prior to his enlightenment, that he performed severe austerities. He actually consumed food for a total of 349 days only, and for the rest of time of this 12 years, he fasted. Another example is our Buddha, Gautama, 6 years of wandering life before attaining enlightenment. He began his fasting, which is narrated by Madhyam Nikaya and is illustrated by famous statue of Gandhara Buddha, right? So Buddha gave up this practice of fasting in favor of middle path, and Buddhist tradition tells us that when he was losing his senses out, right, which had happened during his very intense fasting, there was a woman whose name was Sujata, and her kheer revived him, and revived him when he was about to fall completely. And Sujata just came with her kheer. He then went on to condemn this intense fasting as nothing but painful mortification of flesh, which was unworthy to the seeker of nirvana. And Buddha not known to even recommending such. Buddha is known to even recommending such fasting, for him. So in contrast, the Jaina promote intense fasting, both monks and laity. It is for both, and it was something which was positively recommended for both monks and laity. In other words, the Jaina shamanic tradition differ from the Vedic Brahmanic tradition in its reflection of sensitivity of the food, and as from the Buddhist tradition in its stress on fasting, even intense fasting as a positive component of the spiritual power. Food was very central, to the distinction in the Jaina Shwetambar debate also. Food formed an important aspect as the Shwetambar view that Kevalin, which means the omniscient, and that the ultimate enlightenment are someone who has completely overcome his craving for food and drink. However, the Shwetambar said while the Kevalin may have completely overcome his craving for food and drink, it did not mean that an absence of need for nourishment, which was necessary to satisfy the biological condition of hunger and thirst. Hunger means sudha and thirst, Krishna, and therefore, in order to satisfy his biological need, the Shvetambara said the Kevalan, despite have been totally overcome their craving, will continue to subsist on morsel of food, which was necessary to satisfy their biological condition of hunger and thirst. Now, Digambaras completely rejected this doctrine of Sotambar. They said that a Kevalan subsequent to his attaining omniscient stage will not require, trash intake of food. Now, according to Digambara, the Kevalan, once he reached into that stage, the blood transformed into milk, therefore making it unnecessary to, undertake any intake of food, and he will not be died to this biological condition of hunger and thirst. So he will only subsist on no karma. Now this is supposed to an akarmic matter responsible for maintaining the structure and mass of the body. Then, like a chunk of camphor, this transformed pure body of the Kevalan, like this Parama Udarika Sharira, would just evaporate at the time of death, and the perfected soul will reach its highest form. What is the, if we talk about the central principle of Jaina tradition, ahimsa is so central to Jainism, right? Now, this is one of the central tenet to Jainism. Non-violence was central principle, and for Jain, it was not right to harm or injure any animal, because according to Jainism, all living thing passed, and therefore, Jain should refrain from harming or injuring any living thing, as Tirthankar Mahavira noticed, for all being desire to live, and no one wishes to die. And since meat cannot be obtained without injuring, and therefore cruelty to animals partaking, of animal flesh would have the latent effect of violence in the mind of the meat eaters. Now, the idea is you are what you eat. So the Jaina had, the prohibition against eating dairy products, milk, curd. They did not have any prohibition because what was their logic to this is that animals like goats, cows, and buffaloes, not normal in any way or injured in any ways in the process of procuring milk. Hence, they have not, prescribed anything against the consumption of milk and curd. Now, the most noteworthy thing about Jaina socio-religious belief for the inviolability of animal life is the notion that animals are par with the humans in the possession of soul, and therefore they too are capable of evolving towards their spiritual destiny. Even when Jain talks about the inviolability of animals, they do not subscribe to the idea of the holiness of an animal. They are not talking about the sacredness. Just like you cannot kill a human being, so animals also, as they are par with the humans in the possession of soul, and they too are capable of evolving towards a higher spiritual destiny. Now, they in fact dismiss it as a superstitious belief. The word we get is lokmurtha. This is different between in Jaina tradition, the inviolability of animal's life and the holiness of animal, because they were so concerned with the non-injury towards a living being, and animals are part of that they also laid down strict rules regarding the time of the consumption of food. Therefore, they want the time of food consumption, as Jain are supposed to eat their food before sunset, when the day light is there and they can see, because they fear that you might injure any animal, right? So they have strict rules about the time of the consumption of food. To drink water, the water must be strained. There were dietary rules out of the fear of the killing living being, so it is followed like this. Now, given their stress on the inviolability of animals makes the Jain extended their dietary rules to include various plant based food as a plant life, as Padma Jaini points out in their effort to categorize and classify those plants which could be eaten most safely without least killing. Okay, they develop an entire science of botany because it was so crucial to them. Eating of fruit and vegetables which had many seeds, right? Bahubija was not favored. Rather, the things which were favored were mango, chiku, rice, wheat, leafy vegetables were favored. However, unlike animals, the Jain believed that plants were not in position of soul. They are position of a single sense. They are possession of a single soul and a single sense, that is touch, and therefore they can be consumed. So they were harvesting with care, but harvesting was an issue because Jain do not permit eating of any tuber plants. Now there is an entire philosophy which where their dietary regulation of Jain, and this philosophy is that vegetarian dietary regimens was important for the self-discipline of Jaina faith. There's very interesting Jaina belief that sex instinct was inseparable from the instinct for food, from the craving for food, and within Jainism, the karmic cycle which bounds or prevent you from ultimate moksha. So it's that karmic bondage was based on the accumulation of four major instincts, which refers as sanjana, desire, which means also desire, right? So accumulation of these instincts leads to that where karmic cycle being perpetuated and does not allow you to get out of it. So what are these instincts? They they are like this. The first one is the craving for food and drink. Is the most basic of all instincts. Refers to as, and this craving for food is set a competition between one being, and which leads to the second instincts, that of fear. Right, Bhaya Sanjana. Now, the consumption of food produces the most virulent of all instinct, which is the instinct of sex. Methuna Sanjana. The satisfaction of the instincts produce desire for more food, which in turn leads to completion of desire, and that is accumulation. Accumulation, right? So Parigraha Sanjana. So the karmic bondage, as Jain explains, as going on because of the accumulation of these four instincts. But what is at the root of these four Sanjana is a craving for food, which is the basis of all of them. So therefore, since food is at the root of this karmic that is cycle, in order to fight this karmic cycle, food in all forms has to be left. Now we talk about the issues of fasting. Then if there was so many of the dietary regulations regarding about the food, what food should be eaten, when it should be eaten, etc. Also, what was central to Jainism was the merit that one would accumulate, from not eating food at all. Because to break the karmic bondage, we need to give up food in all forms. So it's not just about what should be eaten. They have this whole regulation about eating, but there was also central is the merit that would accrue from not consuming food. So regulation was not only about the consumption of food, but also issues of not consuming the food, and this gave a rise to a unique feature of Jainism, which has been in public sphere sometime. Now, fasting unto death, or death by fasting, what Setar also refers to as inviting death. Fasting unto death or death by fasting, what Setar refers to as inviting death. Historical experiment on Sapuchiral Hill. It was this giving up of food and the term Salekna in Digambara, and in Shwetambaras. This is a holy death. Samadhi, also it is also known as Samadhi, and this holy death was to be undertaken under strictly prescribed condition and under the supervision of a guru. So according to Jaina norms, there are 4 preconditions to taking up. They talk about upsurge where there are positions they capture by an enemy, and therefore you are unable to follow any of the tenets of this thing, and you put up this desire of giving up or fasting. Other precondition is like durviksha or extreme old age and terminal illness when there is no hope of reviving. Alok in his essay points out that while the Digambaras have been extremely reticent on the women achieving ultimate salvation, as far as the women undertaking this fasting until death, they do not have any prohibitory restrictions on that. In fact, he says that the both monk and the nuns and the laity, they all were allowed to do this fast. The nuns more between 7th to 11th century CE, and the laity, particularly women from aristocratic classes between 9th to 13th century, are in the forefront of this inviting death, that is Salekna. And in fact, Setar also point out that in his book on the study of this, Sapuchiral Hill, right? So particularly from later 9th to 13th century, the name of the man occur only as a pattern of commemorating, where it is only women who has taken fast until death, and male acting as a pattern of commemorating. So Satar says that it was pious laity women who were more in the forefront in the fast unto death, inviting death by completely eschewing and drinking. Alok Paras also analyze, her analysis on the capacity of women to do this. She thinks it has to be do with the Yapaniya sect in Deccan, the Yapaniyas who, unlike Digambar. So Satar says that it was pious laity women who were more in the forefront in this fast unto death, inviting death by completely eschewing food and drinking. Alok Paras analysis on the capacity of women to do this. She thinks that it has to do with the Yapaniya sect in Deccan, the Yapaniyas who, unlike Digambar, used to think that women too are capable of doing this, Salekna or fasting unto death.